Right, just wait for a changeover of slides here. Now, can anyone tell me what these are? Anyone know what they are? They are called Labubus. And it's a whole new craze here. They're kind of tiny, weird fluff balls. Sort of a bit like trolls, aren't they? I think they're kind of creepy, but they're sort of cute at the same time. And they're made by, I think it's a Korean company called Pop Art. I mean, Korea is incredibly influential, actually, on our youth culture. They call it K-art and K-pop. So if you come from Korea, you're one of the, and we've got someone from Korea here, you're influential. So we're influenced by you. But it's a brilliant kind of marketing thing, because what they do is they put them in boxes. It's random. You can't say, I'll have this, what's it called? Labubu. You just go and queue up and you get what you're given. It's like, you remember those old days when you used to get those cards, those football cards, and you never knew what it was, and sometimes you'd have the same set. It's like that. You don't know what you're going to get. And then the idea is you swap them around. But of course that doesn't happen, because actually people put them on resale because they've become highly collectible. Just give you an idea, how much do you think this one is? I'll look some up today. £30. This was on eBay. £522. That's a highly sought after one. How about this one? Looks a bit like my mother-in-law. Oh, sorry. 930. It was actually in dollars, so it was that's translated into pounds. But of course, you'd have to pay the postage from the States for that. And it's amazing. I've been kind of looking it up. I first heard about it on that podcast, The Rest Is Entertainment, with Richard Osman and Marina Hyde. And she went and queued because she wanted to get one for her daughters. And people shop for ages, for hours. They'll camp out at night just to get one. So she was queuing for her daughter, and she said it was like Black Friday, Black Friday when there's all the bargains and people queue up. Fast forward. Doors open, people sprinted. One woman left in tears because she was left out. And in fact, I read yesterday that Google must have got my algorithm on this when I was looking stuff up, but there was a news report about this, that actually in 16 stores, the company Pop Art have paused sales for, get this, potential safety reasons. There's a big shopping centre in Stratford, Westfield Shopping Centre, which is full of a lot of wealthy people actually from London come into that big shopping centre. I've been there. Not that I'm wealthy, but I've just happened to have been there. And someone was interviewed by the BBC, said they'd been in the shop, and they said it was just getting ridiculous to be in that situation where people were fighting and shouting and you felt scared. I mean, some customers even camp overnight to make sure they can get ahead of the queue when there are new editions out. And you don't even know what you're going to get. But, I mean, everyone's chasing it. And it must be worth it, right? Is it? I find this fascinating. Because actually it's not about a toy. I mean, it's about brilliant marketing, isn't it? Someone's making a fortune on this. But it's about our behaviour, human behaviour. It's about the chase, the hype, and the FOMO. That is fear of missing out. I get a lot of FOMO. I booked a ticket to see, they cancelled actually, to see a band called The Last Dinner Party, and I don't even like them. And Richard Buckley said to me, why'd you get a ticket? I said, FOMO. Everyone's going, and they're going to say, it's great, I've got to go, I've got to get FOMO. I get influenced by FOMO, I don't know about you. That whisper in your head, everyone's after it. It's limited. I can't miss out on this. Brilliant advertising, isn't it? They've hooked you. Sounds familiar? Now, I'm pointing back at myself here because, if you don't know me, my thing is limited edition vinyl, records. If they say it's limited edition, and if it's limited to a really small amount, I've got to get it. While I was preparing this, I have to be completely honest. That group I said that Steve Davis, the snooker player, was in, Utopia Strong, limited edition of 250 of a record, and I was meeting with Catherine. I said, Catherine, I've got to stop at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock. Got to stop for a minute. I didn't tell her what it was. It was so I could order one. I got one. Don't know why I got it. It's going to sit on the shelf for ages. Maybe I'll resell it. I don't know. But at the time, I felt like I needed it. And the truth is, we're all chasing something. But here's the point. Chasing fades but contentment stays. We live in a world that keeps telling us, you need more, you're behind, upgrade, get the best, get the next. But maybe it's time to hit the reset. So as Matt said earlier, we're finishing up this series, More Than Enough. And this really is a series about God's generosity. God is generous. He gives us more than enough, and he wants that to overflow into our lives. He wants us to live in that generous way too, to be like God, to be like Jesus. And last week we thought about how to invest for impact, to use our money generously so that it invests in other people's lives. We thought about what it meant to give God the first and the best, how we open our hands and trust him, even when we might never see the return. And we thought about how that can impact other people. And as a church, we thought, let's focus that on the food bank and give to that. And there's been a fantastic response. And the result of that is going to be a lot of people are going to have food parcels, and the work of the food bank is going to carry on. And we need to think about how we can continue that. And there's still an opportunity to be part of that story. You can still give to the food bank. But this morning we're coming to the final stage of our little journey in this series. All around us, our culture screams, chase more, buy more, be more. But chasing fades. You know, the thing you chase at, once you get it, well, yeah, it's not quite what I wanted. I want the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And whatever we're chasing, it kind of fades. But there's a better way. There's a contentment that comes from God. A contentment that comes from knowing Jesus that means we're just resting in him. And we're enjoying the moment in him. Contentment stays. And this isn't just a money thing. This is a direction of life thing. It determines what we prioritize. It drives our choices. It decides how we live. That's why we need to check out where we are. That's why we need to think about how to hit reset. Now, if you're not a Jesus follower, it's great to have you here, and you are not under pressure. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit and listen. But I want you to hear this as an invitation to live a different way. To know this contentment and peace that you can have in Jesus. I want to urge you to resist the advertising and the influences and actually think there's a different way, there's a better way. My life doesn't need to be ruled by these people. Because when we find peace, purpose and contentment, we find that chasing fades and contentment stays. Well, an early Christian leader by the name of Paul spotted that some Jesus followers were under the same pressure. And he'd put someone in place in the church to guide them in the right way. It was like their pastor. His name was Timothy, quite a young man who Paul had led to Jesus. Timothy needs to reset a wobbly church that was in a culture similar to ours. This was in a place called Ephesus, which is in modern-day Turkey. And Ephesus was a massive city, a major city in Asia Minor of that day. There was big trade, big money, and big religion. Just about every religion that you could think of was there in that place. It was like, being, somewhere, like London, except it was by the sea. It was at a port. And the Jesus followers there have been thrown off track because some people had crept in saying that they had come to teach them some new things, and they twisted the message. They were actually greedy people. They were a bit like those Lamumu, I think called Lamumu, those marketers. They had this brilliant marketing thing, and they were saying, you can actually make great gain by following Jesus, but you need to give us the money first. That does sound incredibly familiar, doesn't it? It sounds like those prosperity preachers you can see when you put the television on. God's told me that I need £1 million jet, and he's going to bless you when you do it. There's nothing new under the sun. These guys were doing it, and it was infecting these young Christians. And so Paul says to Timothy, give them a reset. Give them a reset. Get them to see that contentment stays. And so he says, godliness with contentment is great gain. Now, when he talks about godliness there, he's talking about a life that's centered on God. Again, if you're not a Jesus follower, I'd invite you just to think about that and listen into that, because a life centered around God resists the pull of the culture, and actually it's living as God intended us. That's what he's talking about. A life that's lived as God intended us, as God designed for us, and as God has made possible in Jesus. Godliness with contentment is great gain. And remember, these people were talking about what you could gain, get rich, do more, but give us the money first. And he says, no, you don't want to worry about that. You want to worry about actually being rich in God. You'll gain far more, not money, but far more. Interesting word, contentment there. We think of contentment as, when everything's right, when everything's peaceful, when you're sitting by a lake doing fishing, like Brian might be, or, when you're like me, you're sitting listening to some really good music like Squid or something like that. Just contentment. Everything's well with the world. But that's actually not what the word means here. It describes an inner sufficiency, something that's not dependent on circumstances, that's completely unrocked by circumstances. And in our culture, it means we don't need the latest thing. We don't need everyone's approval. In Jesus, we can be steady, secure, and settled. And that is great gain, he says. Interesting word there for gain. It's from the world of finance. So he's been pretty clever here. He said, you want to come out ahead? You want real wealth? Well, don't chase it. Live like you already have enough, and that will be great gain, bigger gain. That's the kind of gain that doesn't crash with the markets. And here's a stark fact that puts it all into perspective. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out. It's a fact, isn't it? When a newborn baby's born, it's got no clothes, got nothing, it's just there. Yeah? And then when we go, we got nothing we can take with us. We come with nothing, we leave with nothing. So why do we cling so tightly? Well, there's an alternative. But if we have food and clothing, we can be content with that. That word again. He says it time and time and time again in these verses. Now that sounds basic, doesn't it? With food and clothing. This isn't about scraping by. He's not saying that we all ought to take a vow of poverty. And actually, later on, he does talk to people who are rich. Some Christians, have got an ability. They're good business people, and they've got ability to make money, and God uses them in that. And he says, I command those who are rich in this world to be generous and use those riches because God gives us all things to enjoy. So you can enjoy what you've got. That's okay. You can enjoy yourself and be a Christian. That's fine. But he said, actually, what we should be content with is actually what we have. Food and clothing was shorthand in their day for the basics, the essentials. And translated for now, that's food in the fridge, a roof that doesn't leak, a car that starts. I failed that one quite a bit, but never mind. A boiler that works, a coat when it's cold. Can I add a record player into that? Maybe not. But not everything either. It's when your needs are met and your heart stops grasping, when you think, yeah, God provides everything I had, and I'm going to enjoy what he's given me. It doesn't mean we have this austere lifestyle, but actually we appreciate what we have and we enjoy it. We enjoy what God has given us, and we live in that moment. But there's an alternative we've got to resist, the pull of our culture. And it was the same pull that they were having there. And this had been kind of inculcated in them by those people who've been teaching bad things. He said, those who want to get rich, these were these people who'd come in and were selling these kind of Christian, so-called, Christian religious get-rich-quick schemes. Nothing new. We see on some of these channels like God TV nowadays. He says those who want to get rich fall into temptation and into a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires. Now, he's not talking about people who want to have good business plans and their business expands. He's saying that people who set their hearts on getting more and more and more and more no matter what. And actually, the people it affects most, actually, the people who haven't got much. You find that actually, that the people I find are the biggest victims of, this kind of teaching that says, give to me for my jet and God will bless you. They're usually the people who haven't got any money because they think if I do that, maybe I'll get some more. And actually, these people are plugging into a basic drive. And Paul says, actually, resist that. And it starts small. It starts with a want. You see that? They want to be rich. It's a bit more comfort, a bit more control, just a bit more. Then a trap, he says. They fall into a trap. And that's a baited hook. It looks good. It feels smart. But once you bite, you're caught. And you don't even know that until it's got a hold of you. When you find yourself scrolling and looking for the latest thing to get to keep up with everyone, comparing yourself to other people, always wanting to upgrade, never being satisfied with the car you've got and wanting the one that the other person's got. And Paul calls these things foolish and harmful desires. Foolish because they don't make sense. You know, like working 70 hours a week just to kind of keep up with everyone and losing all the time with your family, buying stuff when your relationship's falling apart. Harmful because they break things. They break your soul. They take your peace. And these desires, they don't just distract you, they drag you down. They are desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. And that's a kind of a slow sinking there. You know, like someone who's been pulled down in the water. Pretty serious stuff. And actually, Paul doubles down. He goes on to tell us what's at the root of this. This is the most misquoted verse in the Bible as well. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. You've probably heard people say money is the root of all kinds of evil. That's not what he says. Money it's a fact. We've got to have money. We can't do without it. We all need money. It's the love of money that's the root of all kind of evil. The pursuit of these things. And actually that's what's been going on in Ephesus among these bad people who'd come in, and it infected the Jesus followers there. And he doesn't sort of point and say, these people here. He's very, very clever in the way that he does it. He says, I want you to just consider some people eager for money, so we have got a bit of a problem with the ratio on there, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Well, that's a bit of a bleak picture, isn't it? And I hope I haven't made you feel really bad. But he doesn't leave it there. See, what he wants us to do is recognize the danger, see where we're being pulled, and he wants to hit the reset. You know when the alarm bells go off and you realize, actually, I'm in danger here. I was in the city in Nottingham one evening. It was only about 7 o'clock in the evening, and this really nice guy came up to me and he just stuck a bit of paper under my nose. He said, "Here, mate." I said, "What's this?" He said, "Just have a sniff, mate." And, I'll tell you, I'm really glad alarm bells went off, because I thought, what does he want me to sniff? And it was this white powder. I'm not particularly streetwise as well. I remember someone came around and he said, "Do you want some Charlie?" I said, "Oh, yes, please, miss." I said, No, don't have that. I thought it was like chocolate or something. So I said, "No, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you." And he said, "Don't say I didn't ask it." Yeah, very generous of you, isn't it? And I thought, I've got to get that into my generosity talk somehow, wrong kind of generosity. But you see what, the alarm bells went off and I had to hit reset pretty quickly. Whoa, danger there, change direction. And that's what Paul says. He says, okay, this is what you avoid, but here's the positive, here's the reset. But you, man of God, you, Timothy, whose life is centered around living for God, not for these things. Flee from all this. Pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Chase what's right, he's saying. That's righteousness. It's just basically living as God wants you to live. Put God first. Have your life centered around him. That's godliness. Trust God completely. That's faith. When you think you need, well, God supplies our needs. Love people well. Hold on when it's hard. That's endurance. Stay kind when people are difficult. That's gentleness. And actually, in that context that Paul's been talking about, people driving after money, sometimes people can be really difficult when they're flashing their money around. Now, anyone drive a Mercedes here before I say this? What is it about Mercedes drivers? Is it, they always push through. I say, "Oh yes, I've got a Mercedes. I can push through. I've just got this little Chevrolet Spark, and I'm more like, Mr. Bean, not Robin Reliant, but a Chevrolet Spark." But what is it about Mercedes drivers? "Oh, I've got a Mercedes. I push through." And that's when we need gentleness. But we don't just do that. We fight for this. He says, fight the good fight of the faith. Take hold of eternal life. What he's saying, this is a battle all the way through because you're being pulled. But actually what you need to do to see is these things actually just all perish with this world. But God's calling you to something eternal. Something that will not rot away. That's the reset. We already have the life that matters in Jesus and it goes on to eternity. So let's take hold of it. Now, if you're still figuring things out, you're not a Jesus follower, you're welcome here. There's no pressure. This is just an invitation. But for all of us, what I'd like to say is, this week, what if we push back on the messaging that says, you need more? What if we deliberately choose contentment? Now, if you're not a Jesus follower, I think you'll find you'll be living the way that God always intended. The way we're designed to. Because chasing fades and contentment stays. I read a lovely story the other day, today actually, about from that Our Daily Bread. They always have nice stories there. And it was about a lady who just come to Jesus. She was a single parent. And she was really struggling. She opened the fridge. There was one egg, half a bottle of milk, and that was it. And she thought, how am I going to feed my children? And she was comparing herself to all the other mums, who had nice cars and partners who had bringing money in. And she was just struggling to fit the basic needs in. And the kids said, what's for breakfast, Mum? And she didn't panic. She just prayed. She's a young believer. She said, Lord, please help me. And this is absolutely true. This is what she said. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and it was a neighbour who hardly knew her. And she said, hey, yeah, I had some extra things here, and I thought you might need them. And there was bread, milk, fruit, and nappies. That was pretty essential as well. Not everything, but enough. And this is what she said. She said, at that moment, she knew the fridge was nearly empty, but my heart was full. That's that kind of contentment. She didn't suddenly get sort of loads of money coming in, but she had enough, and she knew that Jesus had provided. Now, for Jesus followers, this contentment isn't optional. It's what we're called out to live. So if our life is shaped by consumerism, we need to reshape it so it's shaped by contentment. What's driving you? God's purpose or the pull of the algorithm? God's word or actually what the advertisers are telling you? Contentment comes when we trust God to give us all we need and learn to live like it's enough. So this week, let's hit reset. When you feel that pull, that drive to have something, try this. Need, want, chase. Which is it? Which is it? Do I need it? Do I want it? Am I chasing it? Which one is this? And then choose contentment. So here's the truth. You can spend your whole life chasing more stuff, more approval, more status, and you know it will never be enough. But you can choose contentment. Living open-handed, trusting God to provide, letting go of the script that your culture wrote for you. The chase fades, but God gives. And what God gives is himself. He gives us Jesus, who came to die for us, who gives us eternal life. Because chasing fades and contentment stays. Can I ask the musicians to come out, and I'm going to pray. And just as they come out, let's have a little moment just to say, Lord, what am I chasing? And if you're not a Jesus follower, don't feel under pressure, but just have a think about your life and think, is there more that I'm missing? More actually than these things can't offer me?